Who's responsible for bringing to market the first locally distilled bourbon whiskey in Central Ohio post-Prohibition? It took a long time, and you'll find out tonight on Whiskey Business. I am envious of the self-starter, that person or that group of people, individuals who have an idea, a dream, a thought, and actually bring it to fruition, make it something that actually becomes a thing. Some people would say, this podcast is a self-starting endeavor. No, not really. I've been talking to people in one way or the other, be it radio or stand-up, most of my adult life. So I don't actually feel like this is a self-starting thing as it is so much a continuing thing. But man, yeah, nothing but respect and a little bit of envy for those who actually come up with a thought process, an idea, and actually turn it into something that becomes not only renowned in the area that they started it in, but nationwide, big, huge. Do what you love and love what you do. Well, tonight on Whiskey Business, we're going to talk and find out about one of those self-starters. Hi, I'm Dino Tripodis, and welcome to Whiskey Business, the podcast not so much about whiskey as it is one with whiskey. And with me, of course, the Whiskey Business crew, who I cannot do this podcast without. To my left, on the audio side, Greg Hansberry, doing his due diligence. And to my right, the camera-shy John Whitney, except for that thumb. And that.
There's enough room for him to move around today without knocking everything over.
On the video and YouTube side of things. And our guest bottle tonight, while we will count the Watershed Distillery Bourbon as bottle 110, we are up to our 110th bottle of the program. We are going to be sampling a whole bunch of different bottles from Watershed Distillery. That's where we are. Watershed Distillery right here in Columbus, Ohio. We are in the barrel room, and I'm thrilled to finally, after 3 years, because I actually started this pursuit in year one when I was still at the radio station. Greg Lehman is with us, one of the owners and creators of Watershed Distillery. You with Dave Rigo. Am I pronouncing his last name correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Dave. You and he started a Watershed Distillery, and it has become a force to reckon with in the liquor industry. Congratulations, my friend, and thank you for letting us come in here and do this tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming in and having me on the show. I like how you say that, a force to be reckoned with.
A force to be
When
reckoned
I walk in the
with.
door in the morning, I feel like we're trying to keep the wheels on, but that sounds really...
Is that the case? Because I find that with a lot of people, like I mentioned in the beginning, the self-starters, the people who started something from just a small thread of an idea, and then it becomes this big thing. They say the same thing all the time, that they're just coming in to make sure the wheels don't fall off. But it has grown immensely in the years that you started. What was the actual starting year for Watershed?
2010, we started selling product, and it took a lot of effort to get it to that point, but we started selling, and I felt like every day in 2010, Dave and I walked in and we tried to keep the wheels on. And in 2011, we looked back and we're like, we went a little bit down the track here. Like we actually did something. And when people come in now that came in at the very beginning and they see where we are, they're always impressed, and they look around and they're like, wow, this is crazy. Look at all these barrels. I remember when you had 10 barrels in the corner, and now there's over 1,000 barrels in this room.
Yeah, there is.
But I think that mentality doesn't change. Like if you start something and you get it off the ground, like you have that mentality of, I hope we can keep the lights on. Hey, did we get an order today? Hey, there's someone walking in the door. Like, do you want to buy a bottle? You're here for the restaurant, and you stop what you're doing and you take care of them, and you hope like, hey, tell a friend to come back here so that we can be open tomorrow. Like it really is that kind of like feeling for me every day. Especially if you start with one thing and don't rest on those laurels, of success when you put out your first couple of bottles, and then you decided that we're going to keep going. When you start to incorporate and bring in new products, I imagine
you do it with pause and hesitation, like, because this is going to take some time, this is going to take some investment, this is going to take, a chance to see if this one flies as good as that one flies. And so I imagine that mentality is part of the, oh man, just trying to keep I hope this doesn't knock a wheel off the bus.
Right, that's very true. And no matter how excited we are about a product and how confident we are, like this one's just going to take the market by storm, any product we launch takes a whole lot of push and effort by our team and our marketing group and our sales group. Just there's a lot of competition out there, whether it's beer or wine or spirits. Like we're up against that. Or these days, the marijuana business is about to encroach, I think, in certain states on what we're doing. And so,
unless Watershed gets into the marijuana business,
Totally.
I think you're onto something.
Bourbon infused,
right.
Whiskey,
marijuana,
weed, and women.
We all want in.
You
We
heard
all
it here.
want in. We all want in. The birth of a new idea. You started this with Dave Rigo. I mean, how did this? It's a classic question, but it needs to be asked. How did this whole thing start, and why, and what were you thinking? I mean, I know that you took note of the craft beer industry and saw how that was exploding. Was that part of the impetus to kind of move forward and go into spirits?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely, when you see the local movement that was going on at that time, that definitely helped. We really both worked for big companies, and we both had this itch to do something different.
What were the companies that you worked for?
I worked for Pfizer, and Dave worked for Ferguson Enterprises.
What's Ferguson?
Ferguson, I always say they sell toilets. They do sell toilets, but a lot of like bathroom fixtures and kitchen fixtures.
So
and
neither one of you in the spirit industry.
No, I was selling drugs to pig farmers. Pfizer's
nice.
pig portfolio. So there was no real segue to spirits. We didn't know how to make spirits, but we both knew we wanted to do something different. We had just enough ignorance that we didn't know that we shouldn't be crazy and go into spirits, but just enough smarts to go out and raise enough money to start it. And so we wrote a business plan. We nerded out about that part. We wrote 10, 15 really pretty solid business plans. I can't remember exactly how many. And then this was the one that we really got excited about. And it was because of the brewing industry. We saw that support, we saw that need, and we started asking people like, hey, if we made gin or vodka here in Columbus, would you drink it? And of course, like you start asking your friends that, you're like, yeah, if
sure,
it's good.
man. Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, they're calling like, hey, have you started making gin yet? Like, if you need a taster, tell me when you got some in your basement. And we're like, all right, we're getting there. And so it was pretty quickly, we went from zero to we got a plan and we got some money in the bank. And the whole time we were doing this, it was just kind of this like fun thing. Like I said, there was a little bit of that ignorance there where it's like, we'll go write a business plan. Like, let's go take vacation days and go tour a distillery and take a class. And then it was kind of like, we put a lot into a business plan, a lot of effort and energy, and we had a really good plan. But I don't think either one of us thought about it on the level of like, you got to go home and tell your wife that you're leaving your job to start this company.
Right.
And that's when it got serious, when the money was in the bank, and we either had to tell these investors, hey, here's your money back, we were just kidding, or we had to go home to our wives and say, hey, we're leaving our jobs. Dave's doing it too. Is that cool?
Oh, really? And if Dave jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge with Dave?
Well, yeah.
Probably. He's my buddy. Of course I would.
Luckily, Dave had a bunch of tubs you could make
Right,
gin.
right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So yeah, I think for us it was, we knew that we weren't scratching that itch. We weren't satisfied in those jobs, and we had to do it. And we were like, we kind of got to the point where we're like, if it fails, it fails. Sorry, investors, but let's go try this thing and let's see. And so we jumped in, and like I said, we didn't know what we didn't know, and pretty quickly we realized that the business plan we wrote based on breweries was completely wrong. And we had to sell and put more into sales than any brewery had to. At the time, breweries were kind of this model of, if you build it, they will come. Like, if you build the brewery, you'll sell beer. And with distilleries, it never was that way. It was, you have to sell every bottle out there and hand sell it at that. Lucky for Dave and I, we both came from sales. We were both in sales for years. And lucky for me, Dave was really good at sales. and he went out there and sold a ton of product, and I think that helped us tremendously.
That's what we need on whiskey business. None of us are good at sales.
What?
As I look to my left and to my right and in the middle, none of us. I want to bring up just for a second, and I'll come back to them. But it's interesting. We talked to your neighbors in this business over at Middle West.
Yeah.
And you followed, or they followed. It seemed like in order to pay the bills and keep the lights on, since you couldn't make whiskey and sell it right away, you went with vodka and gin because, as they said, and I'm sure the same thing, that's what paid the bills and kept the lights on initially. But then you don't just make any vodka. You make an incredible vodka.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, that's the idea. Incredible vodka
And the
incredible,
gin.
and gin. The 4PL kind of took the market in 2010, 2011, and I say took the market in our world. It was definitely those two products that kept the lights on and kept us going.
Mm-hmm.
And with those two, you can make them in a couple weeks. So you're going from zero to in the bottle in a couple weeks, and it's out on the shelf. Where bourbon, you can make it in a couple weeks, but then it sits in one of these barrels around us.
Let's bring some of that Watershed bourbon on over here, because I think our glasses have been empty. I think this is the longest that we've gone on a podcast
we're itching.
with empty glasses.
Well, and I think that's Greg. I came here. We have a mutual friend who gave us a tour of this place at about 2011, and I think you had just started the aging process for some of your bourbon at that point.
Yeah, a funny story about that bourbon. We used to think if we shook the barrels, it would age it a little quicker. You get more interaction with the wood, and maybe there is some truth to that. But at that time, when we only had a few stacks of barrels, we could go out there and shake the barrels every day.
Do it yourself.
Now you look around here, and you're like, no one's gonna shake.
Well,
the barrels.
it's funny. Chris Delavi told us that there's and I can't. His name escapes me, but he's making the Metallica bourbon.
Oh, okay.
And
And it listens to Metallica.
And the vibrations of the music are supposed to rattle the molecules.
There's a couple of distilleries that are messing around with that. Some
So
of them
maybe you were
always
onto
play
something.
music in the
I think you
brick
were
house.
onto something before you even knew it.
Yeah.
So if there was music playing, if you thought there was music that would affect the
Well, those
taste,
vibrations would get more interaction with the wood and the spirit, and
especially Metallica.
Yeah, Metallica might be the best way to go.
I'm saying, what would they play at Watershed? I mean, if you played Michael Bolton, would it be like a really wimpy, really wimpy?
I think you're right.
Before it's all said and done.
That's a good question. What's
These
your
barrels were
soundtrack?
aged with Celine Dion.
Oh, they're way hipper than
This is
Celine
Canadian
Dion.
whiskey,
Come
right?
on.
We're not Canadian whiskey.
They're way hipper. Give them some indie rock or something.
Let's do a little toast here as we kick off some of these many tastings that we have. But this one is this the 2-year-old? Is it 4 years old? How old is this one that we're holding on to right now?
This one that we're holding is 4 years old.
4 years old.
Yeah, we've just when we started, this same label was 2 years old, but we've put a lot more in the barrel every year than we take out, and it's slowly gotten older and older.
Oh, nice and nice. Yeah, because I know, and you got some 6-year stuff getting ready to come up.
Yeah,
right?
that's an exciting thing.
The longer you go,
the better it tastes.
The
more
better
complexity
it tastes,
on
older
the
it
end.
gets.
We took some of we launched an apple brandy a couple years ago, and when we dumped those barrels, we took some of our oldest bourbon and filled those barrels, and that will be 6 years old in the next few months. And sometime in 2020, the secret's still out of when that will be, but we're going to bottle that and bring
but we
it to
can
market.
say for the podcast sake that it's coming.
It's coming.
Tell us
Oh
when,
yeah,
but
it's coming. 2020,
Yeah.
it's coming.
And
We
fans of
might have
Watershed
a
products, yeah.
special birthday in 2020 that
Mark
may
your
be
calendar.
celebrating with a barrel aged with a 10-year birthday, 6-year product, and we're gonna bring it out at barrel strength, which is gonna be fun. That'll be a fun.
It'll be your 10-year, yeah.
Yeah,
We do love a barrel strength product.
yeah.
doesn't?
So do we.
This is
You
great.
know,
It's
I
very
think if you're in the
sweet.
industry,
This is
good.
This is kind of
Yeah.
it's very sweet and
It smells. This I'm not the expert here, but it smells almost like a peaty, like almost a Scotch smell. But I don't have that taste profile at all.
Right. You don't get the peat to it, but you do get that nice
Toasted.
There's toasted and almost a little bit of nuttiness.
Yeah,
So this
yeah.
this
Yeah,
bourbon
that
has
nut.
5 grains
That
and,
nut is
and
what I'm thinking of.
one that's a little bit unique in there.
What would the bill be on this?
So you got corn,
Yeah.
you got wheat, you got rye, you have spelt and malted barley.
Wow.
And spelt is the unique one.
Spelt.
Spelt, yeah. Ohio State did a bunch of research with spelt, and they got farmers growing it. And Ohio is one of the top spelt growing states.
What is
because
spelt?
Of that. Think of it like an ancient wheat.
Okay.
So it's
Because it sounds like something that shouldn't be in anything.
right. Sounds like slang something. Like,
That
yeah.
spelled out of there.
It's a little spelty. I gotta say that it's good, but it's a little spelty. I don't care for it. No, this is great.
That's it. I think you got it. Yeah, that's kind of our nod to Ohio.
I'm channeling an old Jewish.
Yeah,
guy.
right. Yeah. Well, you know.
But it's
it
good.
spelts, it spelts.
Or just the opposite. It's good. You know why it's good? The kid put some spelt in it. It needed some spelt, and it's got the spelt, and that's what makes it a good whiskey. All right.
I think we got our salesman here.
I told
Our
you. This
spokesman.
guy.
This is it.
I don't know what it is, but I'll take a dozen.
No, that's good.
So-
We're close to Kentucky, and,
Right.
and apparently they make a little bit of bourbon down there. And so this
Just
is
a
our
soy
nod.
here.
Yeah. This is our nod to Ohio. Like, we've got spelt here.
Yeah.
We're using spelt.
Don't
What do you
use
guys
our
think about
spelt.
that down there? That's kind of our
Speltless.
That's
rednecks.
delicious.
Yeah.
And it's got
No offense.
a really nice finish.
Thanks.
Really nice finish. So, when you're making any of these, who has the final say, if you will, as to like, good to go?
Well,
I mean, do you have other
ultimately-
tasters other than yourself and Dave?
Yeah, so when we
sign
started,
off?
Dave and I had final say. Well, it was only Dave and I for the first 2 years, and then we hired some people. We still had final say. We controlled a lot of it, and actually, so Dave was my business partner until a year ago, and in August of last year, I bought out his shares, and maybe you guys knew that.
Did not.
Okay. So that's why Dave isn't here tonight. I didn't just like box him out and tell him he couldn't come be on the air. He's not here anymore. I bought him out. We split. It was a very, we're still buddies.
Amicable is what they say.
Amicable, yeah. Well, amicable sounds like we barely made it happen, but we shook hands at the end. Like, I don't hate the guy, but no, we're still friends. We're really still friends. And we somehow started it, did well, both went our separate ways. And so then I'm sitting here going, all right, so I got to do a lot of stuff now because he's not here. And I thought about what that really looked like and thought, I can't do all of it. So the nice thing is we have a really great team. And so lately I've been taking off that tasting off of my plate. And we have a team. We have actually a sensory panel. This sounds very official. We have a sensory panel.
Sensory panel.
And actually, the sensory panel is made up of a couple of our bar team, a couple of our production team, and myself. And every once in a while, we get actually one of the marketing guys is pretty much full time on the sensory panel as well. So we have this cross section, and it's not just one or two palates tasting everything; it's the team. And I think that's going to bring our level up even higher.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Starting from nothing, I think I look at myself and say like I'm making it up as I go, and I'm not an expert here, and so it's easier for me to be like, yeah, I feel like I know what good stuff when I taste it, but there's no reason if we lean on more of our people that have a lot of experience, they can't even get it better. So, and our bar team is and our marketing team, they're all really talented. So,
I mentioned you started with the vodka and the gin, but what made you decide to change the recipe on the vodka?
We have some great corn in Ohio. If you've ever driven down 70 or 71. Corn. You've seen the corn.
Yeah.
But we also do a great job with a lot of other stuff in Ohio, including apples. And so we got connected with a guy that you might have to take that quarter-ounce pour off of there.
That's
Sorry.
okay. You know what?
Johnny's trying to give us a
My
little
quarter-ounce pour for
vodka.
my boys is just
All right,
over
that's
there.
fine.
There's 10 bottles on the table.
right,
Quarter-ounce
that's
is
true.
perfect.
Yeah,
10
put the
times
quarter
a
ounce pour
quarter.
on there.
You took the lid off
I
the
don't wanna
whiskey,
call- I don't wanna
"That's
call anyone out, but-"
I said to myself, very generous of him. What a class move. He takes the measured pour off of there, but you know what? I've worked with these guys for 3 years. Quarter ounce pours plenty.
You got sleeping bags back here, man.
There's a couch right out there.
There we go.
I'll wake up and find two strangers, nestled up against a barrel before it's all said and done.
2 new members of your panel right here.
Luckily, the barrels are heavy. They can't pick it up and walk away with it. Thank you.
Now, let me have a little bit of the vodka. Oh, good. Right. Oh, you gave me some already? Good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Quarter
leave-
ounce.
leave-
Quarter
leave-
ounce for you.
Quarter ounce.
That's fine. That's all I need. Leave those lids on. We'll be just fine.
So this vodka is, it's a nod to Ohio. We grow a lot of great stuff in Ohio, and we got connected with this apple farmer, or not apple farmer, this cider, this guy that makes cider. And he goes around a lot of apple farms in Ohio, collects the apples, presses the cider. In fact, we can't even purchase anything from him like during the fall because he's making for grocery stores and under demand. But the rest of the year, we can get this great cider from him. He'll press it the day before, deliver it. And so we started making some vodka with it, and it's delicious. And so we mix it with our corn, and that's what you
So
get.
is that is the old vodka recipe still out there as well, or now we just completely moved over to this new?
Completely moved over to
completely
this
moved
one,
over.
and it's a combination of some great Ohio apples.
Johnny's
and
shaking
some
his
corn.
head like it's the most amazing thing I've ever tasted.
It doesn't burn or anything. This is the first time I've tried your vodka.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you like it. Thank
And
you.
I know a lot of local bartenders love it for making their masterpieces because it's clean.
It is,
It's
it is
tasty.
very. It's almost, it's clean and it's almost. I can't think of the word. Fresh.
Yeah, there's,
It's
there's
a-
almost a
there's a-
subtle sweetness
there's a-
from
there's a
the.
freshness
you think about
to it.
corn and apples and what that will impart.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then there's the 4-peel gin, and then there's the. I've not had the 4-peel gin. We had on the program. You have been on Whiskey Business. We had your Watershed Distillery Bourbon Gin.
Yeah, the Bourbon
we
Barrel
had
Gin.
Fritz, the Night Owl, iconic Fritz Perrenboom from Night Owl Theater, and he's a gin guy. But that's when we were trying to stay true to our roots on Whiskey Business. So like, what do? We always and then the Watershed Gin
Bourbon Barrel Gin,
in bourbon
yes.
barrels. It counts. And that, I used to drink gin and tonics when I was in
Yes.
college. That was my go-to drink in college. And man, I wish that would have been around.
Yeah,
I bring a bottle of that to my mom, lives in Indiana, and she either can't get it locally there. Can you sell it?
No, we can't sell it in Indiana yet.
So
Thanks for taking
I
it over
import it in there for her, yeah.
No,
Or
that's
export
awesome.
it,
Thanks for
whatever.
taking it across state lines.
I don't sell it for Jim Canepa. I do it legally. It's gifted.
I'm going to pour some of this next.
So I'm gonna share something, and
please do.
maybe our marketing team would be like, you can't say that yet. But it's all right.
if you have podcast remorse afterwards, we could take it out. but
Fair,
hopefully-
that's fair.
But
so
hopefully not.
we're thinking about this. Give me your honest opinion. So this is 4-peel gin, clearly with the
Yeah.
yellow label here. Our bourbon barrel gin is 4-peel gin that we put in a bourbon barrel, and a year later, that's what comes out. Mm-hmm. And what we're thinking about doing, we're going to refresh our labels here in the next year or so. We've got some cool ideas where it's near 10 years old, and so we're going to turn 10 and make them a little fresher. But one thing we're thinking about doing is calling the bourbon barrel gin bourbon barrel 4-peel gin.
bourbon
So you have 4-peel gin, but then you'd have bourbon barrel 4-peel gin.
bourbon barrel 4.
And I don't know if that's like a complete loss, because all it is bourbon barrel gin. And so it doesn't really say, maybe people call it Watershed Bourbon Barrel Gin. I don't know. But as I see your faces, I
I've
think
always
this
known
is
it
a
as
terrible
Watershed.
idea.
Well, I've always known it as Watershed. And I'm not a gin guy, so the 4-peel doesn't mean anything to me, but I'm just ignorant on that.
So 4-peel, this is like, most
It's just
people,
like,
they
oh,
know
just
it, they
gin.
know it
Because
as
the
4-peel
4-peel gin obviously is very popular.
Yeah, it's
very popular.
It's our number one seller.
So
if you
you're
look at the
thinking
stuff.
that if you put 4-peel bourbon barrel gin, put the 4-peel on there. That.
Well,
brings
I don't know that it would just tell people more what it is. I don't know that
Do you
we'll
have another
sell
gin,
more.
or is that the vodka?
Yeah, no, there's another
so-
gin.
oh,
This
so
is
there
we're
is
gonna
another
yeah.
gin.
That's
This is a
I
guild
was-
gin.
I was going to get to that one.
And
Yeah.
guild
all
gin is
right.
something completely
So that
different.
makes a
where
little
these
more
two
sense
are
if
these
there's
two are kind of
multiple
married,
gins.
like they're
Yeah.
This is the older brother of this one, and this is kind of like completely different. So maybe under that,
No.
maybe.
Okay,
I'm
I see where you're getting
yeah,
at.
I don't think I've sold you guys yet.
I'll
Let's
talk to you-
drink
I'll
another.
talk to your creative
let's have
director.
a few more samples, and we'll
work
revisit
this
that.
through here.
Okay.
All right.
I'm telling you, there's one consistent element in everything I've tasted so far, and that's just smooth.
It is.
Everything is smooth. There's nothing bitter, or the finish on all these is lasting but pleasant, and yeah, that's the gin. Man, I might start drinking gin again on a regular basis.
I'm telling you,
Get
this
some tonic
bourbon
in here
barrel gin on a like in a gin and tonic on a spring evening.
Well, I do like that one, the Bourbon Barrel Gin, a lot because of what it was, put into. But tell us about the Guild Gin and
so
why
the
is
Guild-
that so?
the-
Why is that standalone?
So the Guild Gin was actually a very limited release product. We made it with Cameron Mitchell's team. So you've heard of this guy, Cameron Mitchell. in
Cameron
town.
Mitchell, he's got a couple of fast food joints around town.
So what we did, he's got a place called Guild House, and when that opened, they wanted to do something cool.
Right.
And we were kind of like, well, we make spirits here in town. Let's do something cool together. And so we sat down with their beverage and their food team, their chef and their beverage team, and said, what if we made a gin? And so they came in here, and over the course of several months, we tried a bunch of different recipes. We came up with some stuff, and this is what we ended up with. And it's it's kind of a nuttier gin than our 4PO, but then we soak fresh chamomile flowers in the gin after we make it, and you get this great
good.
chamomile flavor. Mm-hmm. And don't feel like you have to finish these pours.
Oh no, we must. We have to-
That's fair.
we are semi-professionals. We will finish them. Yeah.
So this
Pacing yourselves.
this chamomile, as you smell it, you'll notice it on the nose, but it's got this great finish. So,
Wow.
cool story about this gin. When we made it, the guys, the team at Cameron's was, they were pumped, and they're like, "This is the best gin you've ever made." And I tasted it, and I was like, "Yeah, this gin is amazing." They're like, "You should enter it into the San Francisco World Spirits Competition," and that's like the
big
the
daddy.
big daddy.
The big daddy.
And all the big guys go, and all the small guys go, and if you win there, you're playing against everybody in the world. And we, they said let's enter it, you're going to win, and we're like, no, nobody, like, we're just wasting money if we enter that. It doesn't make sense. Well, they kept saying it and finally convinced us to put it in there. And the best award you can win is double gold, best in class. And we thought there's no way we're going to do that. But maybe we'll get a medal. You get a bronze or silver. Well, we ended up double gold, best in class.
Best in class. Are these blind taste tests? By the
Blind
way?
taste tests.
So that's that. I think blind is the way. Is
and
the
you're
most
you're
fair.
going against the big guys, the whole deal. So when
Right.
that came in, we were just floored, and those guys were kind of like, I told you so. They're used to doing great things. For us, this was we were pretty pumped about it.
Yeah. I mean, you could. Yeah. I mean, and we're not. We're drinking these neat. We're not. They're not part of a craft cocktail of any sort. Which I will get to a big question here in a moment in respects to that. But these are just right out of the bottle. And again, yeah, the chamomile for sure. I always think when I think of chamomile, I think of the nice tea
Right,
that I'm supposed to
sleepy
have.
time tea,
sleepy
like we're-
time. Not this. I drink.
No.
I'm gonna start drinking this
This'll
instead of
put you to
chamomile
sleep.
tea, but I ain't going to sleep. Right. I'm gonna be calling these guys at 2 a.m. going, let's do something.
Hey, let's do a podcast right now.
Let's go, fired up. No, the Guild Gin is
great.
just over $30 a bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All your stuff's very affordable.
Yeah, your stuff keeps the average, the person that walks into any given liquor store at any given time. I would say the majority of those people have somewhat of a budget in mind, and the Watershed products seem to stay in that reasonable price.
That was kind of a nod to Ohio also, and we kind of thought about it as when we hit the market, Grey Goose was still really high priced, and we always talked like, hey, Grey Goose is the New York City flashy marketing. We're kind of the Columbus, Ohio, where the price isn't crazy, and you get the bottle and taste it, and you're like, wow, that was way better than I thought it was going to be. That was really cool. That was a great experience.
Beautiful. Now I have a question, and I want to know if the next bottle that we're going to try was a risk, because the old fashioned. This is pretty much an old fashioned in a bottle, correct?
It is.
All right.
Yeah.
I may say a couple words that may sound offensive, but I don't mean them to be.
I'll try not to be offended.
Okay. almost a little cutting corners, gimmicky, so to speak. I mean, like the old fashioned. We've had a lot of bartenders on the show that pride themselves on making
old fashions,
on making
any cocktail,
and
right.
then when they talk about the old fashioned and so forth and so on, they go, well, I make the best old fashioned, and then you have the audacity. You have the nerve. How dare you, sir, to put an old fashioned in a bottle and mass produce them and say that it will be poor, goddammit. And say that it will be the best old fashioned one stop shopping, so to speak, if you will. And goddammit, I've had this before, and it's good. It's good. It's really, really good. But did you think about any of that when you were going into we're going to make an old fashioned? Like I said, one-stop shopping. We're going to put it all in a bottle, so you don't have to think about anything. Just pour and enjoy.
Yeah, we definitely thought about that and thought, our main customer with a lot of this stuff is the bartender. And the bartender is out there putting it on cocktail menus so people can enjoy it. And we sell in the liquor store as well, but we looked at it and we wanted something at the holidays where you could go into a liquor store and get a bottle and take it to a party, like a 6-pack of craft beer or a bottle of wine, and set it down on the counter, and someone could crack it open and go.
That's exactly how that's funny you say that, because anytime I'm going to like a party or buddy's house, I get that.
That's awesome. It's work. This is the guy. That's what it's working.
Yeah.
Well, he's always your guy. He can always be your guy. That's awesome. But the reason I question is because Kentucky Derby time, all right?
Right.
There's a lot of people that pride themselves on making the mint julep. And there's some liquor companies out there, I won't mention them by name, that come up with an already pre-formed mint julep bottle and, quite honestly, don't care for it.
Right.
I don't care for it. So I'm curious if you thought that would be a risk of any sort.
We were all really skeptical because when I hear
bottled
bottled cocktail, like I am 100% skeptical. And there was some stuff on the shelf in Ohio not too long ago, and you'd see it, and it was all separated. It was like bottled cocktail, and I'd look at it and I'd be like, "Ugh, like is that still good? I don't know if it's good. Probably you shake it up and it's fine." But we were very skeptical.
So good.
And we weren't going to do it until we went out and made it and had it down where we thought, actually, this is really, really good.
It really is.
And so,
good. So success.
Success,
So,
yeah.
I mean,
and still, like every once in a while, we come in and a bartender tastes it, and he's like, "Yeah, but you haven't had mine." And I'm like, "All right, that's fair."
Well, that's what every bartender says.
And there's
You
a lot of
haven't
different
had my old fashioned.
Yeah, right.
You haven't had my,
And that's why they're in the
Rusty
business.
nail
That's why
and so
they're
forth and so on.
that's why they're bartenders.
And how do you make it? Without revealing company
That's a
secrets,
secret.
just add all the ingredients up and
yeah,
batch it up.
it's not a huge secret.
Yeah,
so we
yeah,
have
yeah.
2 types of bitters.
Yeah,
We have aromatic bitters and we have orange bitters.
perfect.
We have bourbon whiskey.
Yeah,
We have cherry juice and sugar.
and you just mix it up.
And we mix it up.
And it's just.
And we have a giant tank across the street that's 3,000 gallons. It's a good, and there's an agitator, so we can mix any size batch we want in there, and it's easy.
Yeah, I guess that
Instead
makes
of
sense.
shaking,
Instead
of shaking the agitator, there's the
So
3,000
every
gallon
bottle-
tank. We have an
every bottle
agitator.
you
So
make
does the
hand it.
success of the old fashioned from Watershed Distillery make you think about putting another
Manhattan
cocktail, a Manhattan in a bottle, or a rusty nail in a bottle, or maybe not a rusty nail because that's kind of a
Well, the mint julep you alluded
specific
to,
cocktail.
yeah.
But some of the more popular cocktails, does it make you think that we kicked ass with the old fashioned? Let's do a Manhattan.
I mean, we've had the conversation. Anytime you have a license in a still and you can make whatever you want, you talk about a lot of things, but we haven't pulled the trigger on anything because we want to make sure it's great. And honestly, we've tried making a couple other things, and we can't get anything that's home run like this is. Mm-hmm. And until we do that, we won't.
And that's really good. So, I mean, despite what I said when I prefaced it, like, I don't want to offend you when I say gimmicky,
No, but it
worked.
I totally get it. I totally
worked.
get it.
It worked. So,
and that's where I think you're not wrong. When I hear bottled cocktail, I automatically think, meh.
You know, we were recently for the next one I want to try, and I want to see if you and your team are on top of something, or that you kind of know what the next thing is going to be. But we were at a recent grand reopening for the Hyde Park on the Cap.
Yeah.
We talked to their beverage director over there, and he had this amazing vault, you know, of high-priced liquors that were in there and so forth. And he mentioned in passing, and I want to try this next. He mentioned in passing that we should be ready and waiting for a brandy and cognac explosion, a return to those particular liqueurs, if you will. And I'm curious if with that apple brandy, if that's something that Watershed has kind of picked up on, and that, you know, brandy and cognac is going to be a thing.
I don't know if we're that smart.
We want to be there right out of the gate.
I don't know if we're that smart, but we grow a lot of great apples in Ohio and thought, let's make some fun brandy with it. And like anything, we kind of start with something exciting and fun. And if it turns into something amazing in the bottle, then we try to sell it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what this
But what
did.
possessed you to go with a brandy?
It's really close to whiskey.
Okay, yes, it is.
And so we kind of thought, like, well, we're making whiskey from grains in Ohio. This is kind of like whiskey from apples. And we think apples are delicious and make great spirits, so let's see what happens. And if you taste this one, there's no sugar in it. It's not sweet. People, I think that's one of the educational pieces in Ohio. Like, you got to tell people, like, apple brandy, think of it like whiskey. Grain, you're fermenting it, and then you're distilling it. With apple, you're doing the same thing. None of that sugar goes through, but you get some of that flavor from the apple, flavor from the barrel, and it's like just a different complexity than whiskey.
How long has this one been out?
This is it's been out 2 years, and it's 2 years in the barrel.
2 years in the
2
barrel.
years old.
And how's this one doing?
It's doing really well.
Because brandy and cognac is something that I do enjoy.
Yeah.
And I think about it more so in the fall, in the winter.
Right. This is the perfect time of year.
It is a very seasonal.
It's apple cider time of year. And I'll tell you what, if you take your bourbon cocktails, like your old fashioned, and you put half bourbon and you put half apple brandy in there, you'd be amazed at what it adds to your cocktail. Manhattan old fashioned. Put a splash of apple brandy in there.
We're seeing that more and more with the craft cocktails. Add in, mix in the brandies with.
I could sip that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
all night long in front of a fire.
Straight anyway.
I do.
This is what our team drinks at home.
Yeah.
Like our sales team, they'll take this and they want to sip on this. They love that product.
Yeah, that is very, very good. All right, before we dip in, we're getting close to finishing them all before it's all said and done.
We got some Nocino down here on the end.
Yeah, I know the Nocino.
Yeah.
That's also.
Yeah.
We got time because I got more questions for you.
Yeah.
Including something that's a little bit of a departure, if you will, from this, which is glorious, but it's more about you because I get fascinated by some of the other things that people like yourself could have done or continued to do. You were a pro volleyball player.
Right. I was a pro volleyball player.
You were a pro volleyball player. Go on. Let's not leave that hanging. Just what?
So that was it was a fantastic time.
It was a good time. It was a fantastic time.
It was a fantastic time. I played volleyball at Ohio State, and the men's volleyball program at Ohio State is amazing. Like, you have a really good program, and I was fortunate enough to barely make the team, and but I didn't have a team in high school. My dad played volleyball. My dad was actually on the first varsity team ever at Ohio State in 1968. He was
the legacy continues.
He was the captain of the team.
The legacy continued.
I grew up playing volleyball. I was just around it all the time. And pretty soon, like in middle school or high school, I realized, like, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this compared to everybody else. And so
I'm tall.
Right, yeah. So all that helped. And so then I got to Ohio State. And I got on the team and redshirted a year, but then just like I loved it. I played so hard, and we had a great program, great coaches, and it ended up my last year, my fifth year, we were at the Final Four. And then there was some coaches from Switzerland over trying to figure out, like, we need some guys to come play. And it wasn't like we want that guy, Greg Lehman. It was like, hey, anybody graduating that would want to come play in Switzerland, we probably have a contract for him. And I was that guy that said, what about me? That sounds great.
How old are you at this point?
Yeah, I'm like 23.
23.
So,
Pick me. Switzerland.
Right.
I'm in.
Right. Mountains, right? All right,
Yeah.
that sounds great.
Europe. Okay.
And it wasn't like pro basketball, pro football like we think of here, where I was getting paid millions of dollars.
But it was still pro.
But it was like I had a car and my rent was covered. And I had some food and I had some travel money and I was playing volleyball and it was amazing. And I was coming from school where I had nothing. So it was perfect. And
so how does a career like that, when you're playing pro volleyball, I mean, you have to think at that point in time in your life that this is who I am and this is what I'm going to be. What changed that?
Well, I think with volleyball,
how do you go from being a pro volleyball player
you realize with
to
volleyball,
selling drugs to pig farmers?
Yeah. I don't even know how I got there. But I think what you realize with volleyball is, look, you can do it for a few years, but you got to be like the best of the world to make a career of it. Like, there's no there's no real up. I mean, the upside's so small. So after a couple years, my body's falling apart. Which I say literally after a couple years. It's not like they have a whole medical team to put it back together. Well,
how old are you?
Right now I'm 42.
42.
No, but
oh
at
shit!
20,
I'd put him in his late 30s.
At 25, like when I'm 2 years into playing professional volleyball, my body's hurting, and it's one of those things where I'm like.
What?
Part
Seriously,
of it was
from
like,
playing volleyball?
Yeah, from playing volleyball.
I mean, not being anywhere close to a professional athlete of any sort. What falls apart on a professional volleyball player?
So you think about like jumping and the amount of jumping that we do. So it was back and knees and toes. Like toes, literally, I had to have surgery on my toe.
Toes?
My toes. Because when I was
You don't need your
landing, there's just
toes.
impact on them and shoulders go. So, but here's the thing: if I was making the money that people in the NFL or the NBA made,
Sure.
I wasn't falling apart at all. I was feeling great. But if I'm living on barely anything in Switzerland and there's really not a whole lot of medical coverage in my
There's a lot of blonde volleyball players in Switzerland.
so after a couple years, it's kind of like you realize like all my buddies are starting to make some decent money and back at real jobs and like I'm kind of outside the U.S. and the Swiss thing is wearing off a little bit and I'm like it's time to grow up a little bit. Go get a real job.
What did you study in college?
International business.
International business.
Yeah.
So when you go, I'm just curious. Maybe I'm being an ass. I
No,
apologize.
it's good.
Because on every podcast, I'm known for asking an asshole question. But when you're going to Pfizer and applying for a job at Pfizer, on your resume is professional volleyball on the resume?
Well, so here's the thing. So I didn't segue straight to Pfizer. So here's what I did. I went back to the U.S. and talked to everybody I knew. And one of the guys that came and visited us in Switzerland, so my wife was over there the second year. First year I was alone. Second year my wife was over there. And so this guy who's really, he's very well known, very well connected in the pig industry. One longtime family friend comes over.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Very well connected in the pig industry.
It's real.
It sounds like a very...
Yeah.
Pigs like drugs too.
There's some money in that
This is
industry.
this is the guy that you want to hook up with. He's very well connected in the pig industry. This is
Making bacon.
Right. He's a sausage guy. So here's the thing. He comes over and visits us, and we have a great time with him. And he says, "Look, I know you might be done after this year. Come down to North Carolina." He lived in North Carolina.
Okay.
And he says, "I'll introduce you to some people." Well, I realize now he wanted to hire my wife because as soon as we got down to North Carolina, he introduced me to a guy, and I got this job. And within 2 weeks of me getting the job, he offers my wife a job, which was great. I mean, she loved it there, and he's a good guy, a really good guy. But I always give him a hard time, like, you just wanted to hire Lee, and you knew I wasn't going to move down there unless I had a job. But anyway, it worked out. She was in the pig industry, and I was in the pig industry. So we found ourselves going from Switzerland, where we're in this small town, but they're really well connected worldly. This whole thing to Eastern North Carolina in this tiny town where there's infinitely more pigs than people, and we both work in the same building about a mile from where we lived. So we went from like being connected to the world to nowhere in North Carolina in the matter of months. And
In a town where there were more pigs than people.
way more pigs. You can look it up. Duplin County, North Carolina.
It led to the birth of Watershed.
And we had a fantastic time down there. We met some great people in North Carolina. It was fun. But I was working for this syringe company, and I got the job because I didn't know anything about pigs, but he needed help in Europe with his distribution over there. And I said, look,
okay.
I can speak German, I can speak Spanish, I can speak
Everything gets
English.
connected, man.
And you give me this job and teach me pigs, and I'll fly to Europe, and I'll help you with your business over there.
Perfect.
And his deal was 2 weeks of every month you're on the road. And so my territory was everything outside the U.S. In 2 weeks out of every month, I was traveling to Canada, Mexico, Europe, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. Like I was everywhere. And, at the time, at that age, it was great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I learned pigs and flew around the world and sold pig farmers all over the world syringe. I was in the syringe business.
What were the syringes? What were you selling? You mentioned it earlier,
right?
And
so,
like saying what drug?
Well, so the syringe business, like this is where I started. You put the vaccine in there, like
Into
let's
the
say flu
pigs.
vaccine. Pigs get flu like people.
Yes,
and so you put
swine flu. Swine flu. We've heard about it.
Yeah. So you put that vaccine in the syringe and then you give it to the pig,
So they don't get the.
so they don't get the flu.
So they don't get the flu.
Swine flu. Do they just call it normal flu? Probably.
It's just it's just
swine's
flu.
just
If
called
you're in the
flu.
pig
If
barn,
If you're
Yeah.
a pig, yeah, you're just getting the flu.
flu
We
shot.
call it
Flu.
the swine flu
Right.
because we're not pigs.
Yeah.
right.
I'm just glad we cleared that up.
They don't call
call
it
it the human flu?
They don't call it people flu.
Yeah,
Or
okay,
human
good.
flu.
I'm glad we cleared that up. I was wondering about that.
All right, yeah, we have totally fallen off the track on that one. But
No, don't get me weird with the
So then
aviary
syringes led to drugs. It's all it's pig drugs, of course. Pig drugs.
man,
That was the segue. You were wondering. I saw that
Yeah.
look in your eye. You were wondering how I got from volleyball to
pigs.
to, boo-
pigs.
to,
Oh,
to
yeah.
pigs and
I
then
mean,
and then to
no,
booze.
I'm always, we always say on this podcast that everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
And everybody's got a history, and what we try to do is kind of pull it out a little bit to find out how you go from this to this to this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's kind of a crazy path.
A real crazy path.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the 8.
Because actually, I have a question. My one question I think might segue right here.
Okay, right before. Okay, go ahead.
That's all right. So the question I was going to ask about earlier, last time I came here, which was about 10 years ago, we played a game called Hammerschlagen.
Oh yeah.
And there was just one little room over there, and Hammerschlagen's, everybody bellies up around a
big log.
big log,
Yeah.
and you get a hammer, and everybody just takes turns whacking the nail and then into the log, and the first person to get their nail into the log wins a T-shirt.
Now that was kind of the U.S. rules.
Yeah.
So I learned this game in Switzerland when I lived over
So
there.
that's all right. That's what I was wondering if that's the
And-
influence. So it's
And
international.
So where I was playing volleyball,
Right.
And the president of the fan club owned a bar right across the street from my house.
Nice.
So this was a good situation here.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that bar, they had a Hammerschlagen log, and we would play Hammerschlagen almost every night. And the way they played, whoever was last had to buy the next round of drinks. And so,
okay.
I was
I
a
like
hit.
that.
I
I
was
like-
a hit with Hammerschlagen with the local guys because I was always last. Like they were amazing.
They wanted to
So
play
I
with
was
you.
in there buying drinks, and they called me Last Place Greg. That was my nickname. It's I'm not making that up.
You should
They're like,
Yeah. I've been called that before.
I've called that before. He knows that. He knows that one.
So anyway, when we started Watershed, we're like, let's get a log. And I thought to myself, like, I can finally lose this nickname. Like, I can beat some people over here. And so we got this log, and we played it every time.
There you go.
To kick off the tour. It was
He
kind of our
inspired
nod to
us,
Switzerland.
to get a log. We had a log. We moved a log to 2 houses because of this guy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know what it would consist of, but I think there should be a Watershed Distillery Hammerschlagen of some sort. I don't know what hammer. I don't know.
Tournament.
I don't know.
Let's have a tournament.
I don't know in a bottle.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what would go in.
Hammerschlagen.
I don't know what would go in.
That's our next problem.
Hammerschlagen, but people would buy it just to say, "Hey, man, look what I brought. I brought the Hammerschlagen.
Let's get Hammerschlagen.
I brought the Hammerschlagen.
I don't know.
First they had the spelt, and then miraculously they came up with the Hammerschlagen. They're geniuses over there. They had the spelt, then the Hammerschlagen. It's nice. All I could say is the next morning maybe some lox and some bagels and some Hammerschlagen would be ideal. All right. No, we're not getting to the Cheeto yet. I'm going back to serious podcasting now.
Too late.
Yes, I am. No, I'm not. I'm going back to serious podcasting. An A3 permits micro distillers to sell their products on site. There was one point in the history of Watershed Distillery where you were at risk of losing that, correct?
That's correct.
That is correct. And in the process of doing that, you started, I don't know who actually implemented this, but the Ohio Distillers Guild, which is you, Middle West, Tomfoolery, up in Cleveland, all got together and decided to create this organization to...
Yeah, we started it so that we could have a voice with the industry. Well, not just the industry, but the industry could have a voice. I guess that's a better way to say it. So what we noticed at the time, we needed a law passed, or we were all going to lose this ability to sell bottles to consumers walking in because the limit was really, really small. Basically, if you sold over 5,000 cases in a year, then you couldn't sell bottles out of your shop.
Right.
And that's pretty small distillery.
That's a small, yeah.
And we're well above that now, and we're still a small distillery. And so we were down talking to lawmakers, and we were really struggling with it as individuals. And what we noticed was we needed to be uniform. We needed to work together. And so that's when we got together with Ryan Lang and Tom Herbrook from Tom's Foolery. And I think at the time we all three saw the need. And as soon as somebody said, let's start a guild, it was like, yeah, let's start a guild. Let's do this. And so then we started a guild, and now we were all this one unified voice, like, hey, we're the Ohio Distillers Guild. Now we're going to get shit done. And we went down to the state, and we epically failed again because we really didn't know the process. And we were just found ourselves kind of making people mad instead of really telling our story and getting things done. And it wasn't until we, as the guild, connected with John Singleton, who was a lobbyist downtown, and he's worked for us since the beginning, and he's done a really great job for us, just helping us stay organized and introducing us to the process. It's hard to get a law passed.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like, people hear lobbyists, and I heard lobbyist and thought, like, oh, that's kind of a bad word. Like, we're not going to have a lobbyist. We're just a tiny little company. But you really can't get it done without these guys helping. Guys or girls. I don't mean to use that.
No, I get it.
But so it's, they are able to tell the process, and it's more complicated than you learned in high school. We found out really quick. But pretty soon we were down testifying, and we had our bill introduced, and we were talking to the lawmakers. And John just made it much easier to really have conversations with them and get our story across. And as soon as we did that, it was amazing the support we got.
Yeah. When we did our podcast with Middle West, I dig the fact that they spoke, because I asked them the same question I'm asking you. They spoke very highly of you guys, and you speak very highly of them. But when I look at the Ohio Distillers Guild, there's my cinematic mind starts to revolve, and all I picture is like a Godfather moment, where
We're all
we
coming together.
Yeah, where we bring. I want to thank all of the families for coming together on this particular venture. You know, I want to thank Tomfoolery for showing up, Middle West Spirits, and of course us here at Watershed Distillery. You know,
Were you there? You were.
Look,
That's Ryan's voice. That's
we're all in the same business. We all sell whiskey, but we need to find a common thread in order to fight the people that keep us from making a living for the citizens of Ohio and our families. I mean, that's what it feels like to me. It's like the three families get together and decide to unite against a common enemy.
And it takes place in a back barrel room like
Right,
this
right,
somewhere.
right,
Yeah,
barrel like this.
yeah. Get the wool caps. I love it.
So I mean, in that respect, I mean, there is respect
Yeah. Oh, totally.
for what Middle West does, what Tomfoolery does. Both of them, all three of you, make excellent products, and that just raises the profile of Ohio.
It does. It really does. And we kind of looked at it at the beginning. You think about like craft spirits in 2010 was less than 1% of the market in Ohio, and even today it's 3% of the market. And so when we're going into the market and we're thinking about selling our product, we're not going against Tom's Foolery or Middle West or those guys. It's the Tito's of the world. It's kind of a bad word around here. I don't know if I say it, but,
You're not
like,
the first person to say that.
Yeah, I mean, Tito, they sell, it's Texas vodka, and we're up here going, what about Ohio vodka? There's a lot of guys here making great Ohio vodka with our corn and our apples. And so that's kind of where we are with it. And we see those guys as they've helped out tremendously with the guild, both of those companies. And so without them, the guild wouldn't have been formed. And I don't know
Who
if we
started
would've
the
gotten-
guild?
So if you think about the guild,
Whose idea was it?
I think it was Ryan Lang's idea from Middle West, and I think he called us and said, "Let's do it." And we said, "Who else can we get?" And there wasn't anyone else at the time, and Tom's Foolery was up there, and Tom was all in as soon as he heard it too. And
Well, his last name is Foolery.
yeah.
I'm in.
And if I asked,
With all respects to Tomfoolery, I've had your I would love to have you on the podcast as well. You make good whiskey.
and
You
if I-
really, really do. I'm just joking.
if I asked Ryan might say it was Tom's idea. I'm not sure, but I think one of those
But
guys,
you all agreed
came
that
up with the idea.
You all had the smarts to realize that we need to unite and fight a common battle.
Yeah, I think we had all realized pretty quickly that, I mean, at least the way they reacted, I think they were seeing the same things I did, where it's like, hey, I'm getting nowhere. We're not getting nowhere trying to change this law. We're getting nowhere trying to really make a difference with the industry.
Gotcha. A couple questions before we wrap things up. My first one is, after the success of a distillery that's making great products, gin, vodka, you start with whiskey, brandy. We're going to finish off with the Nicino before it's all said and done as a nice post cocktail, if you will.
It's dessert.
What possesses you to start a restaurant? Because restaurants, as I'm sure you know, a majority of them fail.
That's
So
true.
you have a successful venture going here, and you take a chance on a restaurant, which is right across the street, which, to your credit, is very successful, but also could have flopped.
Totally. When we started this business, Dave and I said, there's no way we're starting a restaurant. We like the industry. We're excited about the industry. We're going to do spirits. That way we can always go to the restaurants that are in business. We can always take them to the party. There's always people drinking. Let's go there. Let's not put our sign out and start a restaurant. Like, that's really stupid. Restaurants fail all the time. And I know exactly, I thought the exact same way. And then fast forward to 2015, 2016, somewhere in there, and we're looking at it going, okay, we sell our spirits in the coolest restaurants in Columbus, Cleveland, Cincy, Atlanta, New York, Chicago. Now we're up in Detroit. And so we're selling our spirits in these cool restaurants. We know all the chefs. We know the bartenders. We know the GMs. We know who's out there doing great things in the restaurant industry. And on top of that, we have this distillery that we're giving tours, and people love coming on tour. After the tour, they want to taste just like this, and then they want to hang out. And at that point, I'm like, well, you guys could buy a bottle, and then I can't sell you anything else but bottles. You can't taste anymore without me losing money. So, like, see you later. Like, let's go. Like, I know it feels cool to hang out here, but I, like, move along.
Right.
And so we kind of got to the point where we're like, I think if we had cocktails, and this is not a stretch, because we would ask people on tour, hey, if you could have a cocktail now, would you want one? And everyone's like, hell yeah, cocktails. I'm like, no, we can't do it. But we're saying, like, if you could, would you want that? And of course they said, yes, let's do it. And so we got to the point where we were like, I think we have enough of a brand out there that if we said we're starting a restaurant, people could find it. People could find their way over here. I think we know enough people that we could get smart people in to run our restaurant, since I don't know what I'm doing and Dave doesn't know what he's doing. And I think location is not quite as important in the world we live in, because we all have smartphones and we can all put it in there and be like,
These days, yeah.
Watershed Distillery, oh, it's 2 minutes away or 5 minutes away. Like, I drive by there every day. I think somebody even said today.
Every
like,
restaurant
Yeah.
is in an alley.
For
Right,
someone
it's
who
in an
doesn't
alley.
live
It's
here,
in an
It's
alley.
in an alley.
it's
Right.
tucked away. for
It's in
sure.
an alley. And
But-
yet,
But with smartphones, we're right here. It's 5 minutes. Like, I didn't even know it was right here. And then once you find it, you're part of this, like, cool club
Yeah.
that knows where Watershed
And you
is.
do.
It's back on an
I've been
alley,
to
you gotta
your
know.
Street Fest, the gin thing you did. Like, you
Oh,
use
yeah.
it to your advantage. Like,
Yeah.
you have street parties.
Yeah, we can block off the street,
Yeah.
and the Clinton Township
Yeah,
lets
there
us
you
do
go.
that, and then we get some music and have a good time.
so you get you got the spirits covered, but then you become acclaimed. And I'm not making this up. I mean, this is fact. You become acclaimed for your menu as well, your food.
Yeah, Chef Jack does an awesome job. We were very fortunate. We went up to Cleveland. So he's a Columbus guy, and he was here at Sage for a long time. I don't know if you know.
I know Sage.
Remember Sage?
Yeah.
And then he went up to Cleveland, and he was at Greenhouse Tavern, which he was there when Jonathan Sawyer won his James Beard Award. He was running Jonathan's Kitchen at that time.
That's huge.
So he knows what he's doing. And when we decided that we were going to start a restaurant, we're like, all right, we'll start a restaurant. It'll be a bar. We won't do any food. We'll get a food truck outside. And then we got closer to it, and we're like, yeah, we can't do that.
No.
Like, we make great spirits. We got to have food to match. So who's the best
Great
chef
food
we can
to
get?
match. Yeah.
Yeah, and we got to have great food. And so we thought, let's get Jack. Like, he would be killer. So we went up and asked Jack, and he said no. And we came back down to Columbus, and we're like, all right, well, that didn't go like we wanted it to. Like, we need Jack. And so then we thought about it more, and we're like, we'll convince him. Like, let's go ask him again. And we went and asked him again, and we're like, why no? And he said, this big thing. He wants to move to Columbus eventually, but it wasn't going to work right now, and he needed to wait a year or a long time. And so then we went back to Columbus after the second time, and we're like, shoot. And so then we finally convinced ourselves, like, well, if he's the right guy, like, why don't we just wait a little longer and adjust our timeline? And so we went up and asked him one more time. And the third time he finally said, yes, I'll come down. Like, these guys must be serious. Like, they're going to, they want me down there. So he came down, and he's done a phenomenal job. And when he first started the menu, so we told our investors we're starting a restaurant, and they panicked and said, this is a terrible idea. And
Like I said, restaurants,
yeah, right,
a majority of them fail.
That's true. And so
there's so many restaurants in Columbus.
there are. And so we explained why, and we said, we got this great chef, and they're like, what's the food going to be? We're like, I don't know. Like, he's going to create it. And so we got closer and closer. We hired him. He's on board, and we're getting closer to opening day. And we're about 3 weeks out, and I'm still getting calls from investors, and they're like, what's the menu? I'm like, I don't know. Jack's gonna, he's the guy driving the menu. And a couple weeks before we open, Jack comes into my office, and he's like, hey, you want to try a couple of these dishes? And I'm like, hell yeah, I want to try these dishes. Come on. Like, I'm dying to try them. And so we go out there, and he presents dishes to us, and they were amazing, of course.
Yeah.
And he knew what he was doing. And the menu comes together, and the rest is kind of history. We've been really fortunate to have him on board, and he and the general manager, Andrew, have been here since day one, and they really do a phenomenal job.
We're recording this on a Tuesday night, and I can vouch for the fact that all the spots out there for the restaurant are filled. I mean, you're bringing in people on a Tuesday night, which is
Back here in the alley.
in an alley.
And
Yeah,
an alley on a Tuesday
exactly.
night. And the drink, does he still do the drink menu too? Because the drink menu is second to none as well.
Yeah, the
it's
drink
creative,
menu is always,
it's
we
delicious.
recreate it a couple of times a year, and it's always a
It's
cool
great.
theme and different. And yeah, right now it's a travel theme. So you go in there and there's, it looks like a travel poster on one side and the cocktails
That's
that go with that
awesome.
destination on the other.
Let me
That's the best.
let me start to wrap things up with the Nicino. Tell us about the barrel finished Nicino. What's that all about?
This is a unique one. So when we started our distillery, it was amazing how many people walked in the door with stuff they distilled at home and wanted us to taste it. It was kind of
Really?
like, yeah, I was shocked too. I was like, who's distilling?
Hey, make my.
No, it wasn't even make my. It was more like, hey, you guys make product. You want to taste what I make at home. It was just kind of like validation. Like, tell me what I'm making's good almost.
No, they just wanted. Well, that's a compliment
Yeah,
to you.
no, it was.
Huge
And-
compliment.
Well, this guy named Charlie walks in, and he wasn't really looking for validation or anything. He knew his product was great, but he was like, hey, I make this.
Charlie.
Charlie.
Just some
Yeah.
guy named Charlie.
A guy named Charlie walks in, and he made some Finolcello, some Nocino, some
Oh,
different
yeah.
things. And so he's like, hey, he was a local doctor, thank you. And he,
He's a doctor.
yeah. And
He's a doctor.
But he was a foodie and like loved making this
I
stuff.
gotcha.
But at the time, like Dave and I are barely keeping the wheels on. Like I told you, we
Right.
try to keep the wheels on.
Sure.
So we're trying to keep the wheels on, and he's like, try my Nocino. And we're like, well, that's fabulous, but we got to make gin and vodka and bourbon. And so we kind of, a couple years go by, and Charlie comes in one day and he says, hey guys, you can only make Nocino one time a year. There's a 2-week period when the walnuts are just right. So it's black walnuts. You got to pick the walnuts.
That's what's in here.
That's what's in here. And you chop up these
walnuts.
walnuts, and then you add some cinnamon, some citrus peel, some vanilla, and some clove. And so Charlie comes in and he's like, guys, come to my house today. We're going to make some Nocino. This is after a couple years of him coming in and talking to us. And we happened to be free that day. And we're like, let's go over there. Let's see. Well, it turns out he's my neighbor. He lives right around the corner. And we're picking walnuts. We make a batch, and we go put it in the cellar because it has to sit for a while. And he pulls out some Nocino from years past. And we go out to his patio, and we're drinking this stuff. Now, try this stuff. And we're taking some of it neat, and we're trying some of it over some vanilla ice cream from Jenny's. And this stuff it's phenomenal. It's dessert in a bottle. So if you taste a little bit, let's do it. One more cheers.
Yes.
One more
guys.
cheers.
Yeah.
One more cheers before
Thanks
it's
for
all
coming
said
in.
and done. Dum bum boom.
It's good sound effects for the podcast.
It's like candy.
It is like candy.
It's
So
like
we're drinking this
candy.
on his porch in late June, eating some ice cream, and Dave and I kind of look at each other and like, all right, we're making this product. This is amazing. And Charlie was, he wasn't looking for anything. He said, I'll share the recipe. He's like, I just think someone should make it. I think it's a great product. And so if you look on the back of the bottle, it says, thanks, Charlie.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
kind
it
of a
does.
cheers to him. And Charlie lives in town and comes into the distillery when we do events and stuff like that. He'll come and support us. He's been a great supporter from the beginning. And
He drinks for free
and
now.
you
and he drinks for free. He's always got a case.
and it's fermented in whiskey barrels.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we age this. So what we have to make all of it for the year in a
In one
2-week
Wow.
period.
One shot period.
So we pick all these walnuts, we soak them in vodka with the other ingredients, and then we strain out the liquid, and we take that liquid, we add a little sugar to it, and then we put it in a barrel for a year, and then this is what comes out of beer a year later, and you get those really like the really bitter tannic walnuts. With that sugar in there and the thyme, it gets sweeter and sweeter and sweeter as it goes. And so at the beginning, the first few batches, we had a lot more sugar in it because you taste it right November, December that year, and you're like, it needs more sugar, it needs more sugar. Well, then that same batch a year later, when you taste it, you're like, maybe it's a little too sweet. So we kept backing down the sugar until we get what we have here today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, and just for, hang on a second, just for whiskey business purposes, Toss me back the bourbon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, now, come on. It's already got the taste
You,
label on it.
you boys don't need to be involved. You really don't.
It's another bottle down here.
There's 1,000 barrels down here.
There's a barrel around here
We're not gonna
somewhere.
run out of.
We
There
Oh,
must
the
be
cork's off.
Oh, the cork's.
He's trying to. Oh, and you're saying we're the ones
Wow.
who can't taste
Wow.
it, huh?
Wow. I'm trying to pull a cork that doesn't exist off the bottle.
Oh Lord, it's
All right,
been
just a little taste. You want a little bit?
It
of that?
is great. You know who picks them for us? The Ohio Nut Growers Association. There's a couple guys from there that pick all the walnuts every year. They do a great
Hansberry,
job.
finish off that
Joe
last
and
one
Joe.
over there.
Joe and Joe come pick all
Joe
the
and
nuts.
Joe.
Yeah, they pick all the
Joe and
nuts.
Joe, Daryl and Daryl.
Yeah.
Come and pick your.
Oh, there he is, finishing it off.
See, this
Not
is
a drop
why I
behind.
said earlier the quarter ounce would be just fine.
Right.
Because
Hey, there was a quarter ounce left in there.
Perfect. That was a
That's
perfect
exactly
pour.
it. One last question before we wrap things up. What is the future of Watershed Distillery?
The future is we want to take this to a few more places. So we just started selling in Michigan, and Detroit's a fun place. We have had a lot of fun going up to Detroit, and it's a great city. Just getting to know the industry, the bartenders, the restaurants, it's been fun. And we kind of look at it and say, like, let's take some of this stuff from Columbus, Ohio to a few more cities, tell them about it, get to know those cities, and have a good time with it.
But what are you doing in Butte, Montana?
In Butte, Montana, that's where we got our still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Have you
where
been
it
out
is?
there?
No.
Oh, man, it's beautiful out there.
I know, but why Montana?
Well,
Why Butte?
Because they have amazing stills.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go across the street, you can go into our production, and we have two stills.
What led you to what light bulb went off and said,
go get a still out there?
yeah.
Well, I think it was we were looking at all the stills available, and the technology that they have in their still out there, the head frame still, is it's pretty fantastic. So this guy came from the I say the oil industry. I think it was biodiesel industry.
Okay.
He was building biodiesel plants.
I'm just glad it wasn't another pig guy.
No, not a big guy. Not a big guy. And so if you look at how that's made, he basically took that from a big scale and made it down to a very small scale, put it on a pallet. So it's very versatile. We make our vodka, our bourbon, half our apple brandy on that still now.
Wow.
And it does a phenomenal job. I can pull up on my phone the screen, and I can run it from my phone. Like, it's all digital. It's a very, very cool still, but it's small enough where a guy like us could go in and get it and have that technology. And so
Gotcha.
we kind of fell in love with it, and then we went out to Butte and visited him in Montana. It's beautiful. That was my only time in Montana, and it's a beautiful place.
Is it Montana they call Big Sky Country?
Big sky, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
It is Big
like,
Sky?
You're driving around, and it's like mountains in the distance, and we're driving past the Yellowstone River, and it was beautiful. And so, in fact, we had to drive through. There's always a story with this. So we're flying out there, and it was a big storm. Dave Rigo and I were flying out there, big storm, and we got diverted. So we were in Colorado, and we had to connect, and we were supposed to go to Butte, and we ended up in, what's the biggest city in Billings? I think Billings is the biggest city. I'm stretching. Anyway,
Yeah,
we're clear on
okay.
the other side of the state is where they flew us into. They're like, you're still in Montana, but here you go. You're way on the other side of the state. So we get there. We're in the wrong city. We rent a car, and we drive across most of Montana to get out to Butte. Not most. It seemed like most. It was probably bigger than Ohio, but a fraction of Montana. Anyway, but it was cool. We got to see a lot of the state, and it was beautiful out there. We fell in love with the still itself, and got it back here, and been making more booze ever since.
Yeah. It's a beautiful ending to a wonderful story. We're going to wrap things up, and I just want to say thank you, Greg Lehman, man, for being a great host.
Thanks
First
for
of
coming
all,
out here.
These continued success. I don't need to tell you that. I think it kind of defines itself that Watershed Distillery isn't going anywhere except up and up and up. And yeah, no. Here, you want to knock real wood, not knock on this. So thank you for hosting us tonight and having an incredible podcast.
was awesome.
It was wonderful, man.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
I hope you enjoyed it as well,
man.
man.
You guys have a good job here.
What's that?
You guys have a great job here, going around and talking to people, having a good time.
Yeah, we
Drinking booze.
You know, you're doing what you love and love what you do, and we do what we love and
do
love what
something.
we do. We really do
Yeah.
enjoy this. But this has been a real, sincerely, a real treat. And I'm not kidding when I said in year one, when we were still at the radio station, I wanted to get Watershed Distillery on. And I don't know what kept throwing a roadblock in it, but
Well, this is the best bourbon we've ever made, so you came at a good time. This is good timing. You guys waited just the right amount.
But you know what? We would love to be part of your birthday celebration.
That
next
would be
year,
really cool.
2020.
That would be really
So
cool. We'll have to do something when
If you
that
enjoyed yourself tonight,
6-year-old
if you
let's
enjoyed
do that.
yourself tonight,
Absolutely.
please invite us back and let us celebrate your birthday.
Absolutely. I love it.
All
I
right?
love it.
All right, I'm going to wrap things up and thank our great host and guest, Greg Lehman from Watershed Distillery. Greg Hansberry over here to my left has to give you a little bit of information on social medias, and John
thanks,
Whitney.
Johnny.
And John Whitney. But don't forget to tell them everything that they need to know about what they need to
Well,
know.
we'll give Johnny some love first. Don't subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe to YouTube. It's Whiskey Business with Dino Tripodis. Johnny does the unedited raw version of the show.
And he does. And he just doesn't just shoot it. I mean, he cuts it back and forth, so it looks like a.
It's pretty.
It looks like no. It is a real show. He
It
has
is
two.
good.
No, he's humble. He's humble. He's an award-winning filmmaker, and he's shooting our YouTube videos for Whiskey Business.
That's awesome.
How lucky? How lucky am I?
That's
how
awesome.
lucky am I?
Yeah, that's
And
great.
then, of course, on your end, Hansberry, you do the wonderful audio.
Yeah,
job
thank
as
you,
well.
thank you.
Which
Which
is
reminds
available.
me, subscribe on your favorite podcasting app, and when you hit subscribe, it'll just like pop up right there in your thread every time a new episode comes in. And then we ask you to rate and review us on iTunes or whatever platform you like, because that helps propagate the episode.
He loves the word propagate.
It just sounds official.
It sounds official.
Yeah,
He
it does.
likes the word propagate.
Like and share us on the social medias: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and tell all your friends
About us.
about us.
Yeah, right. Before it's all said and done. I'm gonna say, dude, it's been great.
This has been fun.
This has been. I hope you
Thanks.
enjoyed it.
I did.
I really
Thanks
did.
for coming
I
in.
really did. No, we had a blast tonight. This is probably in recent memory. Not,
Best one this week.
Yes.
I did. You know, I always go in low.
My best one of the week too.
Yeah, I always
We're winning.
I always go in low, never knowing what to expect.
Right.
I don't know you. We met for the first time this evening, but you've been an exceptional guest and open and candid and wonderful about this whole place. So thank you so much. So on that note. Whiskey Business is a Never the Luck production, produced on the audio side by Greg Hansberry and on the video side by John Whitney. And, of course, I am your host, Dino Tripodis, and our great guest, Greg Lehman, and Watershed Distillery, which is going nowhere but up, and up. And so, my friends, until the next bottle, or if we're lucky enough,
Several
bottles, see ya.